Hello my friends and welcome back to the implementation of the env batch class, which is a class that allows us to manage multiple environments simultaneously. In the previous tutorial we defined the init method that creates indeed the object variable being the multiple environments, and we also implemented the reset method that allows to reset these multiple environments at the same time. Alright, and now what we're about to do is exactly the same principle as resetting multiple environments, but this time stepping multiple environments. And therefore, we're about to make the third and final method of this mbatch class that will allow to step in multiple environments simultaneously. Alright, so here we go. Let's create that new method here, which we're going to call, of course, step. Alright, we know very well the step method, but so far we only used it in a single environment, and now we're about to make one to step in multiple environments. Alright, so first, according to you, what is this step method going to take as input? Well, first self for the object, of course, which are our multiple environments, but then what? Well, remember, when we call the step method from an agent in a single environment, well, we take as input the action, because we perform that step by playing an action. And well, here it's exactly the same. We're about to implement the step method for multiple environments, and therefore, it's going to take as input the multiple actions played by the AI, by the different agents interacting with these multiple environments. Alright, great. So now colon, and here we go. Let's define what this step method has to do. Alright, so basically what we want to do now is for multiple agents to step in these multiple environments after playing these multiple actions. And therefore what we have to do is to make some kind of a similar for loop as the one we made here, but instead of calling the makeOn function, we're going to call the step function from our different instances in this self.on's multiple environments. Alright, and now remember, since the step method called from the environment actually returns, that tuple of elements, the next states, the rewards, dons, infos, and some additional information, well, we're going to start with this. We're going to start with what this step method called from multiple environments will return. And so, as I just said, it's first going to be the next states, then it's going to be the rewards, then it's going to be the dons, then it's going to be the infos, and then some additional information, which we're going to disregard here. Alright, we could even disregard this, but in case we want to use this in the future, let's keep this in that variable. Alright, and then now time to call the step method, but so far we only have the single step method, meaning the method that allows to step in a single environment. And so how can we transform this into a multiple stepping method? Well, of course, with that for loop within a list. It's not going to be the exact same range, but I'll give you a hint if you want to implement this first. Something more similar to this. Okay, well actually let's take this, because that's exactly going to be that for loop within a list. We're going to loop over the different environments in our self.on's multiple environments object. And so let's take this, let's paste that within a list, okay, and now let's implement what we have to do for each of our environments in this list of multiple environments object. Alright, so as we said, what we want to do is call the step method that we all know that allows to step in a single environment, because we have the single environment separately. It is this, this env loop variable. That's a single environment, so we can call the step method on this single environment as we're used to do. Okay, so let's do this. Let's first call our environment from which we call this indeed step method. But now, what does this step method here actually take as input? Well, remember, it takes the action as input. And where is the action? That specific action for this specific environment in that list of multiple environments. Well, it is one of the actions that we have in this actions input. But this contains all the actions. What we need is the single action that is being played in this single environment within that for loop. And so how can we get that specific action? Well, it's going to be with the double loop variable. So what we're going to do in the step method is enter a new loop variable, which we're going to call A. And here, we're going to add that other loop variable A for the action, of course, in these actions. And therefore, here, we're not going to loop only in our self.on's multiple environments object, but also in the different actions that we have here. And how can we do that? Well, that's with a zip function, which will take as input not only the self.on's multiple environments, but also the actions. You see, that's the double loop. Pretty nice, no? So now it's not done, almost done, but we just have to do something more, which is just a matter of format, because actually we want all of these to be returned as NumPy arrays. So the first thing we're going to do is do another zip here to transpose this list of tuples, and that's just in order to arrange the formatting in order to create that NumPy array we want to get. And I need to add a star here to do that transposition. Okay, so basically with this, we now have these elements of all the tuples here grouped together. You know, the next states are grouped together, the rewards are grouped together, the dons are grouped together. And now the final thing that we have to do here is to convert all these grouped elements into numpy arrays. You know, a numpy array of the next states, a numpy array of the rewards, a numpy array of the dons, and then infos, which are actually dictionaries. And to do this, since we have the zip function called first, you know, to create and transpose with a star these groups of different elements here, we can't directly use numpy array function, but what we can use is the map function called on the np.array and with this zip of grouped elements. Okay, so let's call this map function, which will take, as we just said, as input first np.array and then exactly that zip element containing the grouped element of the next state, rewards, dons, and infos. Alright, so since I just added this map function, I just need to close the parenthesis here, and there we go. Now we're done getting our group of next states, rewards, dons, infos all converted into numpy arrays. Alright, perfect, so that was the hardest part, and now I know it's very tempting to return those next states, rewards, dons, and infos because, you know, besides stepping in these multiple environments, we also want to return these different elements, but before we have to check something. Can you guess what we have to check? Well, we have to check if any of these multiple environments has finished. You know, if for any of these multiple environments, the done boolean is equal to true. Because if that's the case, then we will have to reset that particular environment that has finished. And so we just need to do this final for loop before returning those elements. And so here we go. We're going to do a for. Then, because we're going to need this time the loop variable, well, we're going to call it I. And then we're going to loop in the range of course, our environments. But here, actually, it's going to be the index. We have to loop from 0 to the number of environments, which we have here, but unfortunately, it's just an argument of the init method. And therefore, in order to get that number of environments, we need to call our object and call the len function on that object. So I'm going to take our object here, self.oms, the multiple environments, then call the len function, which is going to take as input, of course, self.oms. All right. And that's exactly this, and oms. Okay, perfect. So we have our loop. Now let's start it. And so what do we have to do? Let me just scroll down a little bit. So as I said, what we have to check is if any of our multiple environments is done. And well, since we're now looping through the different environments, well, we're going to check that for each of these multiple environments. And so here we go. I here corresponds to a certain environment of our multiple environments. And so what we can simply do is do an if condition like this. If checking if, well, the done booleans of our specific environment I we're dealing with right now in the loop is done, right? So basically this means if done's I, meaning if the done boolean of our environment of index I is equal to true. And so if that's the case, we add some colon. And what do we do if that's the case? Well, as we said, we're going to reset the state of that environment, which is actually given by next state of index I here. So I'm going to take next states here, but of course the one of index I, so I'm going to enter in square brackets I, there we go. So now we have the next state of our particular environment of index I we're dealing with right now in the for loop. And so now, how do we reset it? Well, first by updating it. And how can we do that? Well, very simply by calling the reset function from this particular environment of index I, which we can access thanks to our self.oms object, because self.oms contains the multiple environments, and therefore in order to get that particular environment of index I we're dealing with right now in the for loop, well, we simply need to add here in square brackets the index I. And that's our particular environment we're dealing with right now. Okay, perfect. And so now from this particular environment, we're going to call, of course, the reset function, which doesn't take anything as input, but of course, remember that it actually returns several elements, the state and some additional information, and therefore in order to get the state, we need to add in square brackets here the index 0, and that gives us the next state, which is reset. Perfect. And so now we can do the final very easy step, which is the final return, but we have to do it, of course, outside of this for loop. So we exit that for loop first, and then we call the return final element of that step method, which will return, let's do that efficiently, of course, the next states, the rewards, the dons, and the infos in case we need them. All right, so let's return this, and there we go, my friends. We are now done with the env batch class. So congratulations. We can now move on to the very exciting final step of the training, which is of course the training loop. But of course, let me not forget to run this cell to create our env batch class, which will allow to perform the asynchronous part of the A3C model. Now we have it, and so now we can start the final training loop. And until then, enjoy AI. Hello my friends, and here we are about to start the training implementation, the training of our A3C agent, which we can do indeed because we now have all the tools to perform that training. Alright, so here we go, let's smash this. So we're going to create a new code cell which will implement that whole training loop. We will do that in 2 tutorials because it's quite big, and in this first tutorial we'll just import the TQDM module, which is very nice. You will see it will be used to display a progress bar for loops. So that's going to be a first, compared to what we did before. Then we're also going to, initialize the different objects, starting with, of course, our batch of environments. Now that we, implemented the env batch class in the previous tutorials, where, of course, we're going to create an instance of that env batch class, which will be nothing else than the 10 environments, because we will call it with 10 here. So we will create 10 multiple environments so that we can have 10 agents being trained in 10 different environments, and you will see that it will considerably improve the training performance. Not only the training will be much faster, but also we will reach high performance very fast. So let's do this. Let's create immediately that instance of the env batch class, which will actually be 10 environment instances of Kung Fu Master. And so here we go. Let's call our object env batch, which will be created, of course, as an instance of the env batch class that we just implemented, and which takes as input, of course, the number of environments. And so, do you remember that variable we created for that? Be careful, it's not env, that's just the name of the argument. The variable we created for that was when we initialized the different hyperparameters a bit above. Here it is. Remember that third variable here, number of environments, which we initialized to 10, and that's exactly the number of multiple environments that will be running in parallel to train our multiple A3C agents. So let's take that variable, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to scroll back down to our training loop, there it is, and inside that env batch class I'm going to enter number of environments. Perfect, and then what do we have to do before we start eventually that training loop? Well, it is to reset our batch of states, because now that we created our env batch instance of the env batch class, well, that means that we have our multiple environments, and therefore that means that we also have our batch of states, in each of these multiple environments, and therefore what we must do now is reset all the states in these multiple environments. And how are we going to do that? Well, by using, of course, one of the tools we implemented before in that env batch class, and the tool is, of course, the reset method called from our instance of the env batch class. So there we go. Let's do this now to reset basically all the states of our multiple environments. And so we're going to introduce that new variable which will be called batch states, and which will be, of course, the batch of states in these multiple environments. And so there we go. How do we initialize them? Reset these states by calling, of course, first our env batch object, the instance of the env batch class, from which we call, of course, there it is, reset method, which takes nothing as input. Alright? Perfect. And so now we're ready to start eventually that training loop, but we'll do that in the next tutorial because it will be quite big. So make sure to have the maximum energy for it, because we will also run that training and observe and enjoy, hopefully, the results. So let's just get a good coffee or a good tea or a good nap. And as soon as you're recharged in great energy, well, join me in that next tutorial to smash that training loop. And until then, enjoy AI.